I decided to go back and get another degree.
That's interesting.
And since I was in special ed and I'd gotten that certificate and the state was paying me this money to actually be a teacher, why don't I really learn how to do it and get a broader understanding of what special education was about? And so I went back and began working on a master's in special ed. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I read an article about employee assistance programs, and it was a new concept to me, but essentially I think it's pretty common knowledge what EAPs or employee assistance programs are, but essentially in work situations, personal problems affect performance, and supervisors, employers are not capable of diagnosing personal issues that are affecting performance. They're capable of looking at performance and assessing performance. And so they will discipline according to their progressive disciplinary policies, as performance deteriorates. But if it's a personal issue, the theory goes, if it's a personal issue that's affecting that job performance, any amount of discipline isn't going to do any good. So you'll spend 3 to 6 months, 9 months, 2 years disciplining this person until you have to fire them. In the meantime, you spend all this money hiring and training and investing in this individual, and now you have to start over. So it's bottom line is that it's better to offer personal counseling for that person to figure out how to take care of their personal issues, and as the result, if they figure that out, then their job performance changes. So that was the theory. So what I read about this, and it got to me thinking that, well, these aides or these frontline staff don't necessarily have these personal issues. I don't know what they got. I don't know what's going on. But it seems to be at some point, and I made this stretch as a special ed master's degree person, that possibly these individuals had learning issues. And as a result, they only got a high school diploma, or they got passed through, so they ended up with a high school diploma. And this is the only job they're ever going to have. But I saw so much more capacity in these individuals, common sense, abilities. They knew people, they got along with people. Come on, they can advance themselves if they want to, according to if they could get past this, what I would call then a personal issue, possibly this learning disability. And so I delved into more research on EAPs, employee assistance program. How do you set them up in organizations? How do they actually function? How do you offer it to people, and so forth? And when I got my degree, and I did my thesis on it, I actually did some research in the hospital with these staff to find out who they were, what kind of educational experience they had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what their aspirations were. And I kind of wrote it up in a master's thesis. Whether it was of any value, I don't know, because I've never read it since. But I was focusing my attention on the staff at the hospital, and I no more than got my degree than the hospital offered a position to set up an employee assistance program at the hospital, which was astounding to me. It's like, my gosh, I studied all this special ed stuff, but I also was a little side thing, I studied this, and that now is what I was interested in. It was a half-time position. The other half-time in this full-time position was equal employment opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I was that position was essentially to protect the hospital against discrimination charges by staff. So I applied for the position. I didn't know much about EEO, but I could learn that. Mm-hmm. They knew about EEO because that was in our system for years. Ever since the civil rights laws, we had to do EEO work in these institutions. They didn't know EAP because it was something that came down from the state, from the state office, saying you got to do this now. So in my interview, I essentially trained them or educated them on what EAPs were, and told them exactly the steps to take to set one system up in the hospital. And they said, "Fine, you've got the job." So now I went and trained as the EEO officer, and so that's the transition I made.
So then the transition actually brought you into both of those things.
It brought me into
EEO
right.
and EAP.
Right,
both.
Yes.
So the interesting thought here is or I guess what I want to pursue with you is and then you began doing both of those things
Right.
in that position.
Right, yeah. They put me in, I went from working with patients and other treatment staff to being in administration in the human resources department and doing
Responsible for both of these things.
Yes.
So you'd gone through this experience. I may be trying to make too many connections here, in which case, maybe that's not you don't need to have a smooth, logical path through all this. But I think I remember you telling me at one point something like, and it's a little bit different than what you said about the you invest a lot of time, then you got to retrain somebody because they don't get any better, and maybe there was a personal problem. That was the way you just described it. Another time you said something like, look, the attitude of employers was, you give these guys a chance and you discipline them, and if they don't, get better, you fire them. So it's like it's a throwaway philosophy.
Yep.
You look for an employee, but if they're not going to perform within a certain amount of time, you throw them away and find somebody else. And that was also part of what sort of you were resisting in thinking, no, there's a different way to do this that doesn't involve throwing people away. And it involves instead helping them to connect with capacities that they may not have understood that they had, or how to access them, or how to implement them.
Sure. The way I explain the employee assistance program is the formal explanation of what it is and why it is.
Right.
And so, when you say EAP, even though we're familiar with it, they're not. Folks who are listening aren't familiar like I am. If you work for an employer, you probably have access to an EAP today. Maybe 80% of employers have EAPs. I don't know whether that's true anymore or not, but it was, in the 90s at least until the 90s. So, but what you're saying is the human emotional reason for doing this. This is not a throwaway society. It shouldn't be. When you hire people, they're part of your organization. You invest in them because it's profitable, but there are people, and we associate with each other. So it's not like, if there's 10% unemployment, it's easy. But for the most part, you have to spend money on these folks, and there's this caring element. And for me, personally, I worked with these folks in a very intense environment. Mm-hmm. We needed to support each other and care for each other. And I'll just give you an example. If you walk into a unit or you see a violent incident happening, it's your job as a staff person to intervene and stop it sooner than later. Mm-hmm. Someone's going to get hurt. And so within seconds, I'm standing up if I see something and I'm going towards it. If someone sees me going towards it, they look and they follow me. Or I say, there's a fight down the hall. And that's all I have to say. I don't have to, who's coming with me? We know that we need to step up and run towards it, and we need to intervene. And the way we intervene is in a way that we don't hurt the patient, number one. Number two, we don't get hurt ourselves. So it's not like being like a police officer or a prison guard, but in fact, you're physically struggling with another human being. And it's not like you're going to win or you're going to be the strongest. You just have to be a whole lot smarter, and you have to work as a team. You have to depend on each other. So that's at that level. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of other levels, day-to-day basis, 24/7, that you've got to function together at a very high level because of the potential for that. And because these people are in extreme situations in their lives. Mm-hmm. And they've done extreme things. So it's not like you can half sleep to be there or half care. It's got to be at that level. And I saw the staff as having the potential, and they wanted to do it. They really wanted to do it. They knew what they were into, but if nobody's going to care about them and support them, why should you do it?
Why should they take the risks?
Yeah, why should they take the risk? So for me, as in employee assistance, I said, we can help. We can create a system that can that can help them help themselves if they need it. And if there's other things going on, then we give them the opportunity to explore that outside the hospital, private counseling. They can go out and talk to somebody on their own. To me, it was a very caring response. And it also supported the bottom line of whatever the organization that was developing such an institute. So that's my way of,
Right.
reflecting and responding to what you just mentioned about the reasons for it. So when we're talking about the ARC, it's capacity. Knowing yourself, knowing what you're capable of, and getting support in your environment, your work environment, at least, to fulfill that capacity.
But it sounds like it's support in the sense of it's about capacity in the sense of you know your own capacity, you know your own strength, you have this kind of presence that you've developed and fearlessness really over the years. And now you're working with a bunch of people who are quote unquote at a lower level, but you also are sort of assuming that with the right kind of support, these people really have they have real capacity to handle the situation that they're in, to handle it in a high functioning as opposed to a low functioning way. And there's a sort of assumption there that it sounds like you are making, how you came to sort of decide that that's the assumption you were going to make, that these people ought not to be assumed that, well, they're just sort of gliding by because that's all they're capable of.
Right.
On the contrary, they're gliding by because what the capacities that they do probably have haven't been supported properly, and there's a way within this institution to support them better.
Right.
And in fact, this EAP niche allowed you to sort of put that assumption to work, whether it was providential at the time that you had the insight and the experience with that unit, and that they woke up and decided or the state said they had to create this program. But the bottom line is it's a program that is based upon an assumption of capacity and of the importance of supporting it rather than writing the person off.
Right.